Welcome to the Three Brothers Quest. We have Michael and Ian and Philip Baldwin together in person for the very first time. Hello, brothers.
Hi there.
This is so exciting. Oh, wow. You all look so great, and it's so wonderful to have the three of you together. So, we're going to explore Three Brothers Quest, what brought you three together, and what themes are shaping this exciting project of 3BQ, as we like to call it. And Philip, do you want to begin?
Well, sure. I think I should perhaps say a little something about why we're doing this particular session. We've had now, I think, 17 or 18 interviews.
Mm.
And our kind of philosophy around this project is to try to express and share a sense of a story that these interviews, each one can be taken individually, but they connect together as part of a larger story involving our history and prehistory and how the world has been explained to us, which we think may have the possibility of having other explanations that are not necessarily current. And we want to be able to use this time when we're together, all three of us, to try to connect some of the dots and try to share just what we're doing here. Any one of the talks that you hear on 3BQ, roughly speaking, you can also hear similar talks from the same people elsewhere.
Right.
But it's the manner in which we weave these talks together that gives our project a sense of creativity and originality, whatever you want to call it. So I hope personally, and I think Michael and Ian agree, that periodically we might have these little threesomes to try to share, why do we choose these people? What is it about them that coheres and helps us along in developing this story?
Mm.
Very good.
Yeah, beautifully said, Philip. Thank you. Who would like to piggyback on Philip's remarks?
Well, didn't we think we were going to sort of as part of the kickoff to a little bit each of us say, well, how we came to this,
Right.
and why are we sitting here?
Yeah.
Ian, why are you
Yeah.
here?
Well, we were all going to talk about our journey, how we came to questing as a threesome, and three very different stories.
Mm.
So my quest for meaning took place when I was about 14 and in high school. And in fact, one of the first poems I wrote was about, why are we here? What's the deal? What are we supposed to be doing? And this, for me, deepened in college. At the college I went to had was a pioneering program in what, forgive the term, it's not current, Oriental studies. So I was an English major, but a bastard, because I did a lot of reading in Oriental studies, meaning Taoism, Buddhism, etc. And I got married, had children, and I didn't forget about all of this, but it sank into the background of my life. Michael and I had some connection with Buddhism. Both of us had a mutual friend who was a very serious Buddhist, lifelong. And in the 70s, for both of us, we did a fairly deep exploration of Tantric Buddhism, Vajrayana, Tibetan. And then again, in my particular path, I was divorced, eventually remarried. We moved to Vermont. We started a publishing company. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, we kind of began to come together as a threesome.
Yeah.
Because Michael shared a book by Michael Talbot. What was it called? The Holographic Universe?
That's right.
And this grabbed us, you might say, by the throat. And we all just started to connect again. Now, the real the sharer in this group is Michael, and it's a very special quality and talent. I like to share. I've been a publisher. Brother Philip likes to share. He's an artist and does exhibits. But Michael actually is driven to share in a very particular, very personal way. And so his foundation, the Marian Institute, it's now called, gathered a lot of people around the themes we're still involved in the 90s. And I think I'll drop it there, and I'd like to pick it up a little later because so one of you take over from there.
Well, I'll take over since it's sort of pertinent with the way you're leading off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I started out, well, first of all, I think it's important to say that the three of us are incurably curious. And that is a real overriding factor that drives us to some extent and brings us together. And on a lot of different topics and thinking. And so I guess I started when I got terribly interested in the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill, which led in some way to a very major interest in crop circles, which maybe people have heard about, maybe not, but anyway, they're an extraordinary phenomenon that occur mostly in Great Britain in the summer in the crop fields. And a friend of mine and I went to a conference on crop circles in New Haven, after which we said, well, we got to get these guys to come to Marion and let's pull together some friends and have a little conference. And that's when the critical book that Ian brings up, The Holographic Universe, I picked up and read and went, well, this is ridiculous. We can't just do crop circles. We got to expand on this. And so we expanded on our first conference by having the wonderful near-death experience Dr. Kenneth Ring, one of the presenters. And we also had a wonderful Englishman by the name of John Michel, who was fascinating about ley lines in England and that kind of a topic. And from there, we just took off for about 10 years or more of conferences and workshops. And then quickly, I don't want to overdo this, but several years ago, because a great deal of our interest in Buddhism, which I think applies to all three of us, which, is so much around kindness. And, His Holiness says how to explain Tibetan Buddhism, and you just say it's about kindness. And I thought, why is there so little kindness? Why is there so little compassion? And so I did 2 conferences, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, on that subject. And that led me to recognizing how people didn't really react much to the word compassion. And it became sort of trivial, like the way everybody today signs off with love you, love you, love you. And I always sort of go, do you love me? Is that just a flippant little love you? And so I converted it into, why is the world so cruel? Which I felt it would be more startling and make people sort of go, oh, wow. And cruel not just today, but for millennia. And that drove us into coming up with, which I won't get into at the moment, certain ideas around why is the world so cruel? And I think that was a bit of the nexus that kicked us off.
Well, you guys are a hard act to follow, but my story lacks anything like so much erudition and thoughtfulness, I suppose, in some way. But when I was 7, I made up my mind I was going to become an astronomer. And a devoted aunt gave me a book on astronomy, and I loved that book. And that fascination with astronomy actually never really left me. It kind of morphed into a fascination with navigation while being on the water, sailing boats, and understanding the tides, and knowing when you're on the water, you're somehow connected to the movements of the universe. And then after college, I became very involved in outdoor wilderness education and ran for a time a wilderness education program. And that brought me much closer to, at least for a Westerner, a strong sense of the natural world and living in the natural world and surviving in the natural world. And a big part of that was learning how to think of the other person first, because if you're in a group and you're in the wilderness, you got to think about yourself, but you also have to think about the group. So there was a kind of direction towards community in a very personal sense of the term. But parallel to all of that, as far back as I can remember, I had a sense, a sort of a grudge against rationalism. And I don't know whether it's because I was a bad student in school, which I most certainly was. And I always felt that this little house of cards is missing a lot of cards. And I found getting older in life that, you know, the whole relationship between the rational and the intuitive was way out of whack. And then, as Michael and Ian have explained, we started exploring all these subjects, and book after book would provide an incredible aha. And we'd get all fired up and we'd investigate these things. And we began to see that, first of all, things are not quite what they seem to be. They are not quite what we were led to believe. There are a whole lot of other avenues that seem to be left aside. And those avenues interest us and motivate a lot of what we do in this project. And maybe that's enough for that.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. We continued in the late 90s. We, through Graham Hancock, who showed up as a speaker at one of Michael's gatherings in Marion, Massachusetts, we met a man named John Lash because Graham thought we should. And in particular, I think I befriended John and spent a great deal of time with him. He lives in Europe. He's an American, but he lives in Europe. And he is an astrologer, but mainly a mythologist. And he did with us naked eye astronomy. So what Philip references is, I think all three of us, maybe even you, Rob, babe in the woods that you are. Yeah, we grew up looking at this unbelievable sky, which is the source, I think, of the original source almost of a powerful mystery in the universe. Even though it's only one galaxy, it's our galaxy. And as John taught us, there's only one star up there that is outside our galaxy, Andromeda. And so we spent a lot of time with John, and he came to conferences, and we learned about Gnosticism and the Sophia myth, which is a very powerful myth. And then my company, Chelsea Green, ended up publishing his book called Not in His Image, which has done very well, but it's a book that should be read by millions, in my opinion, because it takes our sense, the three of us have this sense of nature being integral to our lives, without which we'd be lost, and makes you think at another level about it. That nature is Gaia. It's a being. It's not just individual trees, flowers, bushes, etc. And that being is connected to the galaxy, or what we would now call the cosmos. And we parted ways with John in around 2009, and we had a little, I think, hiatus.
Yeah.
And then we said, guys, we are guys, we should reconnect. All our instincts are not being nourished. So that gave birth to 3BQ.
It's good.
And if I may jump in, Ian, you and I started working together in 2005, and I started hearing from you from time to time stories about these mysterious two brothers of yours, Philip and Michael. And at one point, Ian, you handed me a copy of Not in His Image and suggested I read it, which I did not do for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And then when we began Three Brothers Quest a few years back, we started talking about working together. I read that book for the first time and was astonished. And so that's sort of how I entered the 3BQ picture.
It can't be overstated how important these books are. Each one of these books, which yield the people we invite to interview, it comes with a sort of aha, a certain sort of additional awakening. And we read Graham Hancock's books 30 years ago and had an aha. But about 5 years ago, Monica, my wife, and I were driving up here to see Ian, and we listened to Graham's The Fingerprints of the Gods on tape in the car, which is a great way to hear books. You're in a bubble and you can concentrate and so on. And by the time we got here, we were levitating. We were so excited. And the way in which so many of the things he had to say felt somehow revealing. They were so insightful. You couldn't say, well, this is true or that is true. It was the flow of the river that just made you feel, wow, we need to investigate this. A civilization did not start with Sumer. The story is much older and much more complicated and fascinating. And that happens all the time. One of the people that kicked us off on this project was Jeremy Lent, the patterning instinct. Well, that man did such an incredible overview of the whole civilizational story. We were agog. So it's about sharing some of these thrilling experiences we've had and continuing to learn, continuing to ask questions, continuing this quest.
Continuing to quest. Yes. I will say briefly, when people ask me about Three Brothers Quest, what is it that you four are doing? My response is, well, for me personally, I'm getting a second PhD, because every conversation that we have with our guests and then amongst the four of us feels expansive, incredibly mind and soul expanding. So I'm so enjoying this conversation here. Before we get into
let me just say,
please, yeah,
Rob, I think that what's important for the audience to understand is we didn't read all of these authors and thinkers in one fell swoop. So it's been a journey for us too of sort of waking up to an enormous amount of knowledge or information that we didn't really have at the outset.
Mm.
And so, it's like Philip talking about Graham Hancock's book back when he listened to it. These are just discoveries every month or during the year. And they're all coming together in a way to create this storyline that we are here attempting to kick off, weaving together from these sources. And, we started with, one of the themes I think that we have is a search for meaning. And I think it was obvious that we were stuck pretty much on the West. And then we, I think, got into perhaps next, or not next, but alongside that, indigenous, and then East. And the East is one where we know we have to do a lot more work. And then quantum, which I think we all went, oh God, how are we going to deal with quantum? And we've been dealing with it with several of the authors that we've already interviewed. But it's all unfolding still, as far as I think the three of us are concerned.
Absolutely.
And so trying to make it cohere is indeed a big challenge, because there is new input all the time.
Yes, that's very good, Michael. And there also is, perhaps I express my prejudices in some sense, but it seems to me in almost everything we read, there's an enormous underlying thread, an enormous underlying river. And that river has a great deal to do with the balance or imbalance between the rational and the intuitive, between the left brain and the right brain, to put it in scientific terms. We've sort of abandoned our wholeness as a species, I think. And a lot of this reading and research is an effort to refine that balance. And why did we get off it? How can we get back to that balance? At least from my perspective, that's a huge part of the job.
Oh, yeah. I think that the word that keeps in my mind is, because we go at it hammer and tongs. What exactly are we about, and what binds us here intellectually, at least? And I think it is this sense of a profound mystery. The human being is a profound mystery, right? And we have this feeling, which I think a lot of people do, of, well, we've lost the plot. Mm-hmm. We're drifting into continuous iterations of the iPhone and self-referencing that's happened with such a vengeance. Increasingly, every year is an increase. Now it's all about AI, and not just simple AI, which has been around for a long time, but generalized AI, quote unquote, generalized, that, is starting to, well, there's the famous case reported in the New York Times of Sydney, who apparently falls in love with the guy she's trying to serve, and prying him, his Times reporter, prying him loose from his wife. So the machine presence, which is a creature that we think comes out of the left brain, the scientific side of our total personalities and capacities, we're feeling, whoa, it's happening so fast that we feel let's make part of what we do as a group is let's make our contribution to giving people a chance to step back from this
and reconsider.
Reconsider, yeah. Recalibrate their own priorities and how they live their lives, right? Because it's not just about thinkers, although it is. Thought and action have to go together, otherwise they don't mean much.
Good, very good.
So the
Yeah.
search for meaning, the rational versus the intuitive, the purpose of human beings, this strange moment we find ourselves in as we contemplate the future, artificial intelligence, the digital, we haven't used this word yet, but transhumanism. So these are four themes. I think you all like the term meta themes,
Right.
of the Three Brothers Quest. Are there others?
Well, I would add that something that constantly comes up in our conversations, which is, in general, the notion of progress and evolution. Now, evolution has a biological meaning, a la Darwin, but it also has a kind of more generic meaning in terms of evolving. Well, everything is always evolving one way or another, but I do think we pose the question: is progress real? And actually, a case can be made that we are in a situation of devolution. And you take that from the point of view of civilizations long gone, or the quality of the civilization of indigenous people. Is ours better? Have we improved on that? Really? These are questions that need to be asked. And when we, of course, if we look out at the material world, I think you can make a pretty good case that we're not looking at progress. Depends on your perch, depends where you're standing, your perspective on that subject. But I think it's a big piece of the conundrum in which we find ourselves.
And then you have Michael's perennial commitment, which is cruelty.
Which is about cruelty and why we're so violent.
Well, we suspect there are four good. You want me to do the four?
Yes.
There are sort of four good reasons for the generation of this behavior today and for so long in the past. And I think one of the most important ones is the gender imbalance. Because when you allow the masculine traits to go unchecked by the feminine, I think it's pretty clear you end up with the kind of greed, power grabbing, manipulation, control that it gets unleashed by no moderating force, the feminine. And then we discussed the left brain, right brain. There's very definitely a dominance out of unbelievable on the left brain. Then there is the religion of science, which if you can't prove it, it can't possibly exist, which pertains a great deal to the topic of consciousness, which is a big theme for us in some of our interviews. And then finally, I think the sort of tsunami of narcissism that's been afoot, starting maybe allegedly a couple of thousand years ago. You put those four together, and I think you end up, and I'm sure that many others, et cetera, and I think you end up with this this behavior.
Very good.
Yep.
So I don't know whether I'm making the right move here, brothers, but
We'll slap you down.
we just did. I think our last interview was Mauro Biglino, wasn't it, Rob?
Yes.
Our second.
Well, yeah, we've interviewed him twice.
The interview we just finished,
the last
which is our second
interview
correct.
he did was with Mauro
yeah.
Biglino. And Biglino is a careful, highly erudite translator, linguist of the Old Testament, hired by the Vatican to translate a number of volumes. And finally, his literalism got the better of the Vatican and he was asked to go elsewhere. But he focuses in a way, he focuses on this, the God is gods, and they were, it's kind of alarming, but they were extraterrestrials, but they were very like humans. They had passions, and they were the architects of, among other things, Sumer. They left insoluble mysteries like the massive stones of Baalbek. Could any of our modern machines pick up a Baalbek stone?
Well, I don't think 1,000 tons.
No, 1,000 tons. So there are plenty of mysteries like this.
Anomalies.
And the source of what Michael was saying about the imbalance goes at least back to the biblical narrative. Because Yahweh was a relatively minor God, according to Biglino, according to the literal sources. But he was a total patriarchal God. And he was a completely warmongering God and a genocidal God. And so, I'm not saying this is correct. I tend to be agnostic on things like this, but it conveys the problem of violence in a new light context.
Yes.
So this is why I think we feel that we're slowly building, for lack of a better word, a library that is, you might say, specialized. But it's a library of very discrete or different kinds of source materials. And the purpose of it is to connect points, connect issues, connect themes, and to help us resolve what being human means.
And I think a corollary to that, one of the things that's so impressive about Biglino is the fact that Biglino is not interested in philosophy or religion per se. He just says, go about whatever you want to believe in. All I'm doing here is my best job at translation. And I welcome any and all to challenge me. You think I've done it wrong, show me, because I welcome the challenge about the way in which I've interpreted these words. And I think that's a little bit about what we're doing too, which is that obviously we are going to have biases and opinions about what's missing or what needs to be fixed or imbalances or whatever. But the point is, we're not trying to shove anything down anybody's throat. We're trying to expose an audience to material that does have a coherence as we mosey along on this journey, I think increasingly so. And that's sort of what I think is the point of our having this threesome and doing it more in the future, because each time we do it in half a year or whatever, there will be so much more material that will be worthy to discuss and impact our thinking and our coherence.
Yes. I like the term connecting the dots, because disparate as some of these subjects appear on the surface to be, they are intimately linked. I can't think of anybody who's spoken up till now whom you could not realistically link to all the others in terms of underlying value or underlying meaning. Yeah. Rob, how are we doing? Are we conveying?
I have one last question.
What we're about?
I have one last question for the brothers. Looking ahead 1, 2, 3, 5 years with Three Brothers Quest, where do you imagine taking the quest over the next couple of years? And let me share one. Can I share one fantasy?
Sure.
In answer my own answer to that question, I would really love to see 2 or more of our interviewees in conversation with one another about all of these vital human topics. And when you begin to look at our roster of guests and imagine pairing them together for conversation with us, the mind begins to reel. It's like, for example, Mauro Bellino and Graham Hancock in conversation, which they have done
Yeah.
already, but wouldn't that be something? Or Rupert Sheldrake, the great British biologist and theorist of morphic resonance, in conversation with, say, Paul Levy of the quantum revelation.
Yeah.
So that would be a fantasy of mine for Three Brothers Quest. I'm just, blue skying here. But where do each of you imagine we might go with Three Brothers Quest?
Well, if I'm leery of those things. It's a very organic process, and we are old.
You don't want to do 5 years.
There's a guillotine up there. It's always there, even when you're a baby. Still, with each passing day, it
threads
draws a
are
little
popping.
closer. So one is leery of getting too highfalutin. It's an organic process, and what you've just suggested, for example, is a great idea. We could do that in the next year, no problem. I would be loath to risk projecting too far out there.
Well, maybe let me reframe the question a slightly different way. Who would the brothers appreciate talking with over the next several podcasts that maybe someone we haven't spoken with yet, or maybe someone we'd like to bring back, or can we move in that direction?
Well, I would slightly rephrase it. For me, and I think my brothers, but for me, this is about building a community of listeners. And the listeners, or the audience, is part of this community. But the other part of the community, apart from ourselves and you, are the people we enlist. And so those three components mix and self-create something over time. And that's very important for me as conceiving, why am I doing this? Yeah, I'm doing this because I want to build a community or be part of, maybe that's too grandiose. We are part of a much larger community, but we want to make our contribution.
And it connotes participation.
Yes.
Participatory.
Yeah.
From the various listeners and
and
interviewers and whatever.
And how we do that is something that will be on your desk and all of our desks, so to speak.
Yeah. I love
how
that,
to
Ian.
eventually incorporate, as Michael says, our listeners, our audience.
And putting on my professor hat for just a moment, I really like the idea, and I know we've briefly explored this together, but the idea of creating some sort of for lack of a better term, curriculum, which is a little bit too highfalutin and institutional a phrase for me, but it does the job in this instance. Some way to continue to build the community of our listeners, viewers, participants, and share these questions, these themes, these ideas with an ever-growing audience would be powerful. Well, any last words, brothers, about Three Brothers Quest while we're all together?
I think we've sort of covered it. I feel I've been rather surprised that we've managed. You should know that we did spend the day yesterday talking through the whole 9 yards of this project.
Yeah.
And when I got up this morning, I thought, good Lord, I haven't a clue what I'll say. And it was true. But I feel sort of gratified listening to Michael and Ian. their articulation of
Yeah,
what
you
we're
too.
doing.
And yourself. I think we've covered it. I think we've
I
covered
think
it.
we have.
I think we
There's-
have. I think that Michael mentioned 6 months. Philip has mentioned every quarter. I kind of think I shade more to every 6 months, that we gather as a foursome, and that will help move this knitting together
Right.
things. And we've just started on the knitting. For those of our listeners who are listening to this, we've just started this knitting. But it's important that the three progenitors of the podcast continue to knit together. And we don't know exactly what we're knitting, but I think it's important that we do it.
Yeah.
Well,
Well
thank
said.
you. Thanks to the three of you for including me in the Three Brothers Quest. Truly, I also come from a family of three brothers, and it is a really special project, this one for me, and I'm honored to be part of it. So thank you for that. And I look forward to our next four-way conversation. And in the meantime, we have more podcast episodes and more conversations with our guests ahead. So thanks to the three of you. It's so nice to see the three of you together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks.
Great.
We
See you
wouldn't
soon.
be anywhere without you.
And travel safe.
All right. Adios.
Ciao.